Today, we are diving deep into one of the most crucial and honestly most misunderstood eras in all of American history, Reconstruction. And we're going to look at it through the incredible mind of W.E.B. Du Bois, who argued its failure wasn't some accident. It was a deliberate and absolutely devastating choice. So let's just start with this powerhouse of a quote from Du Bois himself. He's basically saying that after the catastrophe of the Civil War, real, actual progress had a very specific price tag. And it was a price, he says, that America looked at and refused to pay. And that, right there, is the central mystery we're unpacking today. What was this price? And really, why would a country that had just bled itself dry in a horrible war refuse to pay it? Well, according to Du Bois, the answer is found in the chaos and the conflict of one single pivotal year, 1867. All right, so here's our roadmap. We're going to look at the price of the disaster, this crazy four-way political standoff, the epic battle between the president and Congress, the revolution that it sparked, the economic divide that completely undermined the whole thing, and finally, Du Bois's really radical conclusion. First up, the price of disaster. Let's really set the scene for what was happening in 1867. I mean, just try to picture it. The country is absolutely shattered. The South is in a state of total social and economic collapse. The job wasn't just about rebuilding a few cities. It was about fundamentally remaking what America was. It had to figure out the future for 4 million newly freed citizens, and their place in this democracy was the single biggest question facing the entire nation. Now, we usually think of this period as a simple North versus South fight, right? But Du Bois saw something way more complicated. He saw a four-way standoff with four totally different and frankly contradictory ideas for what America should become. And this chart just lays it out perfectly. You've got the Southern planters desperately trying to get their old power back. You have Northern industry, which is all about profits and tariffs. Then you've got the West fighting against monopolies. And in the middle of all that, you have the abolition Democrats who are pushing for full human rights. As you can see, these goals didn't just differ. They were in direct opposition to each other, a total political tinderbox. And who's sitting right in the middle of this powder keg? President Andrew Johnson. Now, you'd think Johnson, coming from a poor background, would side with the West and their populist ideas. But no. In a really perverse twist, as Du Bois puts it, he was sort of flattered into siding with the old Southern planter aristocracy, which set up a massive, massive conflict with Congress. And this, folks, brings us to an absolute showdown for the soul of the nation, the president versus Congress. And just look how fast this all happens. In 1866, the South, feeling bold because of Johnson, flat out rejects the 14th Amendment. So by early 1867, Congress hits back, passing the Reconstruction Act, which basically puts the South under military rule. Johnson, of course, vetoes it. But then Congress immediately overrides him. The battle lines were officially drawn. Johnson's way of arguing his case was, let's just say, clumsy. To try and win over the West, he attacked Northern finance by making this bizarre comparison between the national debt and the South's lost investment in enslaved human beings. This move just backfired spectacularly. It alienated Northern investors and made him sound like he was defending the very aristocracy he was supposed to be against. So the key thing to get here is that this wasn't just talk. Johnson used every bit of his executive power to block Congress. He vetoed the Freedmen's Bureau, he pardoned former Confederates, he fired military commanders who were trying to enforce the new laws. This wasn't just a disagreement over policy. It was a full-blown constitutional crisis that led directly to his impeachment. So, pushed to the absolute brink by Johnson's obstruction, Congress decides to do something truly revolutionary, something Du Bois calls a revolution from above. And this slide shows you their radical plan. The Reconstruction Acts were a top-down rewriting of Southern society. Step 1, military districts. Step 2, new state constitutions. And Step 3, the absolute game changer, universal suffrage for all men, no matter their race. This was totally unprecedented, and it was all going to be enforced by the United States military. And the result of this? A political earthquake. Get this, by 1867, over 700,000 black men were registered to vote across the South. For the very first time, they actually outnumbered registered white voters in several states. The entire political landscape was flipped upside down, literally overnight. Just look at these numbers to see the impact. In South Carolina, Black delegates were now the majority in the state's constitutional convention. In Louisiana, it was a 50-50 split. This wasn't some tiny shift. This was a complete inversion of the old power structure, and it was only possible because of federal law and military backing. But, and this is a huge but, this political revolution had a fatal economic flaw. Du Bois argues that political power was only ever half the battle. The ultimate reason Reconstruction failed came down to the fact that the working class, both black and white, could not or would not unite. And that brings us to the Great Labor Divide. You see, on one side, you had the white National Labor Union. They saw black workers not as potential allies, but as some kind of mysterious threat, as competition. They literally told them to go organize separately. But on the other side, black labor organizations knew that their political power, the vote, was their only leverage to get any kind of economic freedom. So they were working towards completely different goals and, tragically, ended up allied with opposing political parties. And Isaac Myers, a leader of the Colored National Labor Union, just nails it with this quote. He says, "American citizenship for the black man is a complete failure if he is proscribed from the workshops of the country. I mean, what good is the right to vote if you're barred from even earning a living? Political freedom without economic freedom was a total failure." And this leads us to our final section, and to what is probably Du Bois' most provocative and challenging interpretation of this entire era, what he controversially calls a momentary dictatorship. Okay, now, I know this is a charged term, but let's break down what Du Bois actually meant by it. He saw this very brief period of military-backed black suffrage as a kind of temporary dictatorship of labor. For one fleeting moment, the working class, made up almost entirely of formerly enslaved people, held the real balance of political power in the South, all because it was propped up by the U.S. Army. But here is the fatal flaw. This dictatorship of labor couldn't last. Its power was borrowed. It came from Northern capitalists, who were really only interested in using Southern labor to break the political power of the old planter class. Once the planters were brought to heel and agreed to play by the new rules of industrial capitalism, that support vanished. The army left, and the old order was allowed to surge back and retake control. And so, in the end, America refused to pay the price. The great experiment was abandoned. The inscription on the tomb of Thaddeus Stevens, who was one of the fiercest champions of real Reconstruction, is just a haunting final word. He chose to be buried in a segregated cemetery, he said, so that he could illustrate in my death the principles which I advocated through a long life, the equality of man before his creator. It really leaves us with a profound question. What is the true cost when a nation wins a war but refuses to pay the price of a just peace?